I'm Babs Carrier, and I am the Director of Education and Outreach for our Innovation Institute, which you may or may not have heard of. Has anybody heard of the Innovation Institute? Okay, a few of you. And the reason I ask is because it's new, so there's no reason that you necessarily would have heard about it. About a year ago, almost a year ago in November, the Chancellor and the Provost and a number of other high-level leaders from the University of Pittsburgh decided to create an institute across the entire university devoted to innovation and entrepreneurship. This is a very cool thing because it means that my job is to service all faculty, all students, and all staff. And by students, it's really from freshmen to postdocs. And help them with educational opportunities, with activities, with competitions. We're doing things like initiating a student accelerator around innovation. We're going to do innovation-oriented dorms next year. So this is new at the University of Pittsburgh, so you'll hear a lot about us. And our website is innovation.pitt.edu. And all of the events around innovation and entrepreneurship, including competitions like this, no matter whether they're the Innovation Institute or engineering or chemistry or anything, will all be listed there. So it's a pretty good start. And I am here today to talk to you about some business basics. My assumption is that most of you don't know the information that's here. David may know some of it because he's been in a class of mine, and certainly. So I'll breeze through some stuff, but feel free to ask questions along the way. This is for you. So I've done this talk before, so I don't need to hear myself talk. So I'm trying to bring something that will be relevant to you, to give you new information really about how to think about an innovation, a technology, but not so much how it acts in the lab, but how it interacts with the marketplace. Because it's very easy to come up with great technologies that 10 years out, that 15 years out are going to be applicable. But how do we come up with things that are going to be appropriate kind of in the shorter term? And how do you know that there's going to be a market for something? So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. And I will try not to go on too long. If there's any issue where we get to time, I can speed through things. But you know, like any typical person, I probably have more slides than we need. But this is what I'm kind of planning on covering, is the sort of concept of a problem and solution. And by that I mean a marketplace problem, right? So it could be an unmet clinical need. It could be a gap that something is not filling, which means that your idea comes in as a solution that can solve that, right? So it's a little bit of a different way of thinking. We'll talk about customers, right, and different sort of layers of customers. We'll talk a little bit about competition, about barriers to entry, barriers to competition. These are some sort of common terms that you might want to use as you move forward in this competition and in others. When we'll talk a little bit about revenue models and pricing and value proposition. And again, I may skip around a little bit. So the premise of all of this is from research to market. What does that really mean? And so this is a little flow chart that basically gives you, if you start with research and you come up with an invention, this is the aha, I have it moment in the lab, right? I think I've discovered something that might have some value. So the first step in this university, assuming that you are faculty or a graduate student, because it may not be the case for an undergraduate student, would be an invention disclosure. And that's really where we're looking at some patentability issues, and is this something that can be patented and things like that. But regardless of whether you do the invention disclosure or not, you end up with an innovation, and innovation is really something that has marketplace potential. So you could have an invention that is not an innovation. You probably can't have an innovation that doesn't have some invention. So we have to do some market and business analysis, and this is kind of where you guys are right now. You probably have an idea. You may not have built a prototype, but we're trying to determine, does it have market potential? If so, we can commercialize it. You can do it as a startup. You can license it out. But eventually it becomes a product in the marketplace, and that's what I'm really sort of focused on, is how you get these things from the benchtop to the marketplace. In healthcare, often it's from benchtop to bedside in terms of patients. So the president of Georgia Tech puts it like this: research is not an invention, and an invention is not a product, and a product is not a business. So what is a business? A business might have multiple products and multiple markets, and an invention can't become a product until you productize it, right? If it's a laptop invention, and it's at the bench. That's great if it works and maybe you've done some animal studies or whatever it is, but to become a product, there's always a process. If it's a drug, it's a really long process. If it's a device, it's less of a long process. If it's an app, it's an even shorter process. But it still is a process of developing something that's robust enough that it can withstand the marketplace punches that it will get in terms of customers. Because what you don't want to do is spend a lot of time, effort, and money developing something, put it out there, and then nobody wants it, or nobody uses it, because either it doesn't have value, or it doesn't work, or for whatever reason. So we're going to look at all of this from the lens of the entrepreneur. That's my own background. I'm an entrepreneur with several startups under my belt, mostly in life sciences. I co-founded a company called LaunchSite. For 15 years, I've been an entrepreneurship professor at Carnegie Mellon University and here. And I write about entrepreneurship on my blog, and I think about entrepreneurship all the time. I've written a novel about entrepreneurship. It's a murder mystery where I kill off a scientist. It's been my life's dream. I'm trying to get it published and finish it up right now. So, solution and problem. So in the world of academia, we often start with a technology, and then we go out to the marketplace to see if there's a fit. Really, if we could have our druthers, we would reverse this process and we would say, what are the problems in the marketplace today? And then you would come back to your lab and say, I can solve them. Right? And so you would go to industries and companies in those industries and talk to them and figure out what they're doing, what they're not doing, right? And we don't really do that in academia because the way that we write grants is we write grants for very forward-thinking research, and that's awesome, except that it doesn't necessarily provide you with a solution to an existing problem. So the first thing that you guys have to do is figure out what your problem what the problem in the marketplace is, and do you really have a viable solution? Are you a nice to have or are you a must have? Because if you're a nice to have, you know, that's great, but that's a tough sell. If I must have you, that's awesome, right? That's a great value proposition. So you want to sort of think about that in the context of what your projects are. So if we start from the market need sort of perspective, we look at the problem, then we kind of analyze, well, how much pain, and I know this is healthcare audience, I don't mean physical pain, but how much sort of pain is that marketplace in? In other words, are they having to do a lot of things that are very costly or time-consuming or difficult in order to solve their problem now, and can you come up with that as a solution? So let's define market, just so we're all on the same page. I say it's a group of potential customers, and they have two things, both the power to purchase and unsatisfied needs. Because if you don't have both of those, if you have unsatisfied needs but you can't afford a solution, it doesn't really matter. And if you have purchasing power but you don't perceive it as a need, it also doesn't matter. So the greatest need, you could have a need that might not be a business opportunity, right? And lots of business opportunities have big needs or little needs. So if you're going to do something where you're going to license it or create a new venture or really have some legs in the marketplace, there has to be a market that exists. And that can't be something that is in the future. It has to be something for today. So in market analysis, what you're trying to do is answer the questions that are on this list. So who are the customers? And let's differentiate between customers and end users. Basically, customers are the ones that write you the checks. So if I have an app, right, I have a weather app, and I'm going to download that weather app, and I'm the user of the phone, am I the customer? Maybe. If I pay $4.99 for the app, maybe I am. But if it's a free app, probably not. If I'm the end user and it's a free app, who are the customers? Advertisers, right? Think about Google's business model. We don't pay to do the searching, but Google has advertising. That's their business model. It doesn't work unless they have millions of people doing the searching. So when Google developed a better, faster, sort of more broad search engine, that brought millions of users, which meant the advertisers suddenly had an audience, which gave them their value proposition. So what are the benefits to these constituents, right, to end users and to the customers of your app, of your product? So if many of you are focused on a sort of unmet clinical need, so if we take diabetes, for example, and you're going to provide some kind of monitoring solution that's going to help diabetes patients, I don't know, be more compliant or something like that, okay, that's great. We could say that there's a need for that. Who are the customers? Is it the diabetic patient? Is it the family? Is it the doctor? Is it the insurance company? Is it the hospital? I mean, who is it? Is it the diabetes clinic? Is it, I don't know, but you'd have to figure that out, because where we usually do is we usually skip all those components and we just talk about how many patients there are and what that need is. And that's great, but that's not your customer unless that patient is paying somehow. So who are the decision makers, influencers along the way, and are they prepared to pay? In other words, if you have a solution and you think it's an unmet need, then is there really the capacity to even pay? What's your competition like? What are the trends and drivers? How do you sort of get in that market? And then once you're in that market, how do you stop everybody else from imitating exactly what you have? And these are the components of any business, no matter what field that it's in. So for market research, you ask the questions: what's the problem I'm trying to solve? Who needs my solution? And who else is trying to solve the same problem? That's competitive research. But if you don't know what the competition is doing, you can't possibly know whether you're unique, whether you really have a problem, whether you have a solution. So the three essential questions are sort of just a different way of framing it: is what's the market need? Who's my market? Who are my competitors? And that's what you want to sort of find out. And I think you don't have a lot of room in a 2-page summary that you're going to be submitting for your Pinch next sort of deadline to become a Pinch finalist. But some of the way that they're going to judge what you're doing is by some of these kinds of metrics, because they're looking to create research that's going to have some value in the marketplace. So market research has fundamentally two paths. There's secondary market research, where you're going to do a bunch of internet research, and then there's primary market research, which is about getting out of the building and talking to actually potential customers and potential users and really having some documentation about what that need is. And we'll talk very briefly about all these things. So secondary market research, existing sources. Primary market research is largely sort of interviews or maybe surveys. And really, in the context of what we're talking about, it's all qualitative research. We're not looking for statistical significance. You're not going to survey thousands of people or millions of people. We don't have time to do that, or really, it's beyond the scope of what you want to do. But a well-placed interview can really affect what you're doing, because you need to make sure that you're putting your efforts into a marketplace where somebody really needs what you have. And you really can't figure that out inside your head, no matter how smart you are, no matter how educated you are. Even experienced people within a particular field have trouble with this. So the qualitative research basically is full of things like open-ended questions and very small samples, but very targeted to find out what's already out there. Is this a problem? How are they solving the problem right now? And if I had this solution, could I get it into the marketplace and make it viable over time? So secondary market research, you guys know how to do this. It's industry reports. There's associations. You can look at patents. The Patent Office is a great resource. There's lots of market research reports and investment research. You can just Google it. There's all kinds of places to get that kind of information. The primary market research that I would encourage you guys to do some of between now and when the submission for phase 2 is for Pinch is to really take a look at, create a list of some potential customers, influencers, maybe lead users, experts, channel partners, distributors. If you're looking at anything in the medical device space, distributors, those that work at the durable medical equipment providers, they have their arms and their hands on both sides. They know physicians, they know hospitals, they know patients, they know what's going on at home. So they'll have a really great perspective for you. And your purpose for that is really sort of exploring the problem. So when you go out and ask interviews, you're not trying to sell what you have, right? That's a different thing. People don't want that. They're going to hang up on you. They're going to refuse to meet with you. Your job is to go out and ask open-ended questions and listen, which is why we have a picture of a little furry animal here with big ears. You want to find out from their perspective, get them to articulate the problem. Because it happens all the time that you think you have a solution, but it's not what they want. And you don't want to spend your time and effort doing that. So get them to articulate the problem. And then say, well, if I had a solution to that problem, would that be of interest to you? That's a great sales technique, rather than going in and trying to sell somebody the vacuum cleaner that they don't need. So just a few slides on sort of market size, on how to come up with, how do you size this? How do you do market research? And again, I'm assuming most of you have not done this in the past. So the pie, this is a little bit hard to see. I guess I should have light font in there. But the total available market, people come in all the time and they say, it's a $26 billion market. And if I only get a little tiny piece of that, what a big market that's going to be. Okay, so the total available market is a big market. It's how many people total would want the product, how many units would that be, how large in dollars if they all bought at a certain price. That's math, we can all do that. But it's really not going to happen because the served available market is going to be a smaller, that's more targeted to your slice because you're not going to service everybody that's in the market. So you have to figure out what that smaller slice is. And it's the same thing. How many people really need or will use the product? How many people have the money to buy the product if it's not everybody? How large would the market be in dollars if they all bought? And that's going to be a smaller number than the total one. And then the next one will be your target market, which will be even smaller. So this is how much can I eat. If the other one's the pie, then there's the slice. This is how much can I eat. So this is really, who am I going to sell to in these first few years? Let's be realistic. You can't go after everybody all the time. So figure that out. And then how many customers is that, and what does that market size look like if you do that math and multiply by your pricing? That's a much smaller slice than the total available market, and it's great to say, hey, it's a really big market with lots of potential, but I'm going after this slice. I'm looking at males between the ages of 32 and 44 because of X, Y, and Z, and I'm only looking at them in certain areas because, or a certain sort of demographic, and justify that then. That's how that will make sense, and then sort of do the math. And how do you find that out? Well, again, it's by talking to customers, identifying channel partners, other people and firms that know the market that you're trying to go into. Unless you've already been sort of selling or marketing to these kind of things. So getting out of the building, getting out of your comfort zone and going and talking to potential users, potential customers, potential partners, and figuring out what do they know and where do I need to be, I think is incredibly valuable for you guys. So I'm going to move on, spend just a couple of slides about competition and a few other things, give you a few sort of buzzwords. But before I do, just any questions or thoughts or comments about sort of market analysis, market research? Does this give you a little bit to go on?
When you talk about numbers, a half dozen, 2 dozen?
Depends on what it is. If we're talking about overall cancer or something like that, probably half a dozen's probably not gonna cut the mustard. It depends on who the half dozen is, though. What if you're talking to the leading expert, at some major cancer institute like ours? It sort of depends. So the thing is, I don't think it's about volume. I think it's about the quality of the information that you get. And what you're looking for is, it's literally called customer discovery, to discover who your customers are, and then customer validation. Once you think you know who your customers are, then you need to validate that. And so we're in the early stage of that, which would be really the discovery. So if you go out and you did a half a dozen interviews, and that kind of said that kind of gave you a pretty clear picture of your problem, I'd say right on, that's a really good number, right? You don't need millions to discover that. Other comments, questions? Yeah.
You mentioned in the customers that your end user is not the customer, but the distributor or the pair who's going
Could
to
be.
check could be your primary customer in that case. Now, what if there is no one out there?
What do you mean if there's no one out there?
For your competitor, we don't know who that company would be, for example, who would buy the device.
Meaning that you have no idea who your customers are?
Well, we have a general idea in terms of who might be interested in it, but they haven't made something similar.
Right, so you'd go talk to them,
Okay.
right? You go talk to them and
They
find
could be a
out.
potential.
Sure. I mean, there can be a fine line between somebody who's a competitor and somebody who's a customer, right? But if there's nothing out there now, people always say, oh, I have no competition. We're going to talk about competition. Oh, there's nobody doing the exact same thing that I'm doing. Well, duh. Of course they're not doing the exact same thing that you're doing. But if they have a problem, they must be solving it somehow, right? So computers came along, right? And, you know, what was the competition for computers?
Graduate students.
Yeah, and handwriting, and, I mean, could they have articulated that they needed a computer? Probably not, but, you know, I mean, typewriters also, right? So the thing is to create a list of, you know, of who you think your users are and your customers are, and call them up and talk to them. I mean, chances are, as a researcher at a university like Pitt, you're going to be able to get access somewhere, and it's a little tough sometimes, but it's a great learning experience, and then find out and talk to them. You know, and instead of telling them what you have, say that you're investigating this particular area. You sort of see a gap in blah, blah, blah. Do they agree with that? Oh, no, we think there's no problem there. Absolutely, our products are fully, you know, fill that particular problem, and there is no problem. Well, what do their competitors say? You have to dig a little bit, because people are not going to necessarily articulate, you know, I mean, if you go to a physician and you say, you know what, there's no cure for ALS, like, you know, a physician's going to probably say yes, but if he or she is a neurodegenerative disease doctor, they're going to say, well, but there's some palliative treatments or something like, I mean, they're going to try to, they don't want to be blamed for there not being a particular treatment. So you have to be a little bit careful in this. But if you don't know, then do the research to find out where it is.
I just want to sort of give you an example that I'm thinking about and see if this is along the correct lines. So in my situation, our team's situation, we would consider the patient and physician as an end user,
Uh-huh.
and the insurance company as the customer.
Yes.
I would hope that the customer will actually want the benefit for the end user.
That's right.
But it may be hard to convince
The insurance company.
Right, exactly. So I think
So
we'll
what
have to-
would convince the insurance company?
Well, cutting down on the costs.
Right. But so the thing is, if you say to the insurance company, we're going to do something that's maybe along the lines of preventative treatment, right? So instead of, and I forget what your thing is, but instead of you know, somebody being in the hospital for lung cancer, you know, we're going to do something preventative. So the value proposition has to be strong for the insurance company. If you're really cutting costs, you know, that's good. But you're going to have to prove that through data. So it can't just be an idea, because an insurance company probably is going to say, well, you know, give me a study that shows that fewer people are going to now die of lung cancer because of the app that you have for smoking cessation or whatever it is.
So for the second round, we need to come up with some numbers or with, okay, some specific.
I think so.
And I can make, it's to put some of this in context, in terms of the next round, it's a 2-page document that you submit, but two of the things it needs to cover, you know, we need the problem statement and the solution. Again,
Right,
getting
so
back to problem
what we've just
solution.
been talking about.
We want to introduce the team, and there's something called, we say here, the scale-up feasibility statement. Okay, and we're not a business plan competition, but this is the
Right.
business,
Okay.
right? This is, well, this will be sustainable because the insurance company is willing to pay for this, and you know, you've got 2 weeks. You can't solve this problem now, but you can say, we talked to the people at UPMC, and they say this is a problem, or something.
Exactly. Or you got a case study from UPMC Insurance or
Yeah.
whatever that said this is how some new technology got in, you know, and became a reimbursable event.
And then another thing that, again, that's part of what we ask this next round is just a description of the customer or user. And again, what we're trying to do is get some of this art of commercializing things added on as seasoning to these projects, right? We want people
Yeah.
to say, this is the problem, this is the solution, this is how we can make it so that it's sustainable, and I don't
Yeah.
have to keep asking you for $100,000 every year. And this is the person that would use it. And those are the kind of things that, again, it's a 2-page document, so you don't have a lot, but just to get a step down that path, I think will be good for all of you, and it's what we're looking for.
And
Without saying this is a business competition.
That's right, that's right. And in actual fact, at Pitt, we don't have any business plan competitions, to my knowledge. We're doing some interesting things, but I can tell you that the first pinch competitions, that a couple of the winners, you know, the first place winners, are continuing the work towards commercialization. One of them had taken my benchtop to bedside class, and she's really working on commercialization and getting really enthusiastic about it. And I ran into one of the other ones who's a physician in Parkinson's. I forget his name. Yeah, that's right. So he is now in our GEAR program, our first GEAR program, going through the steps towards real customer discovery. Then it's like a 5-week process of customer discovery. So you don't have to have all the answers in 2 weeks for this, but you have to start that process, because this isn't a regular research grant where all we care about is sort of the research that's sort of far out. We're really trying to do something that will have legs. Will they all have legs? Well, of course not. Any other questions about that?
So in any device thing, I mean, with the feasibility, there could be several layers to that.
Yes.
For example, the manufacturing.
Yes.
With the sustainability aspect, right? So within the next year, for example, if you have a prototype, then you need to show that you have the capability to make a product, manufacture it, but at the other time, you need to show the evidence or feasibility to also support that the clinician would also be trained or would be using this so that the patient would benefit or something like that.
Yeah, so you have manufacturing, but now of course you can outsource a lot of the manufacturing. It's not like you have to become a device manufacturer, right? Because there's a lot of resources there already. When you're dealing with device, of course, one of the big things is the regulatory hurdles, right? Are we a 510K? Are we, a human device exemption? I'm on the board of a company right now with the technology out of CMU and Pitt, and we just had our pre-HDE exemption call, right? And we're going to be exempt because we're dealing with an orphan drug. Or do we have to go through a PMA? Dottie Clower and Eric Beckman and the company Cohera Medical they had gone through about a year and a half ago, got their CE mark, but they got their PMA, their pre-market approval, just 3 weeks ago for tissue glue, and it was 6 years and $60 million. So I think if you're going to do a device, you have to have a little bit of an indication. You don't have to know all the answers, but you have to kind of know a little bit about what's going to have to happen. Yeah, and I would say regulatory, manufacturing, reimbursement. Can you fit into an existing code? Because the process of getting a new code, a new CPT code, is like really arduous. So if you can do it with under an existing code, I think that's beautiful. Anything else on sort of market? So competition is there is always competition, and the reason that when you're kind of doing market research, you want to do sort of competitive research because you have to figure out what's already out there. And if there's something that's out there solving the problem, even if it's different technology, you have to analyze that and know what the strengths and weaknesses are. And it's not always obvious what that is because it may not be direct competition. Your particular chemical formula is not going to be the same as somebody else's, but you have to be able to understand what is out there now. And so that requires kind of a deep dive into that and doing some analysis on the competitive landscape. In the process of doing that, you will figure out what your competitive advantages are. And I'm sure there's a sentence or two in our 2-page document where you could sort of address that in terms of the pinch competition. And so the strengths and weaknesses, so figure out what of the competition, what are they doing that works really well, and what are they missing that probably means that there's an opportunity for you. And if you look at historically at simple things like the internet, like Bill Gates was one of the first guys who had a vision about PCs, right? Remember, well, it goes before your time, but he sort of said a PC on every desktop. People thought he was out of his friggin' mind. They thought, because that was the day of mainframes and mini computers and all that, and he was looking at PCs, he almost missed the internet. He didn't think that was an important invention. Internet Explorer was really, he bought Netscape. It was really late to the party. So you have to look at what's there and figure out what the competitors are not doing that gives you the ability to figure out what your differentiators are. And this is just a sort of list in terms of what potential things might be. You can have intellectual property as a differentiator and things like that, but you got to know why you're different. And that has to be significant enough that it matters. And so, you might want to have a chart. I call it na-na-na-na-na-na-na, because it's like a traffic light, right? There's red, yellow, and green to sort of compare your product with other products to show that you're sort of better in a simple kind of way. So barriers, there's two kinds of barriers. When you're looking at competition and marketplace reality, you have to look at what are the barriers to entry. What is stopping me with my new thing, my greatest new invention, from getting into the market? And other competitors will have put up barriers. They may have intellectual property that will lock you out. You may have to look at freedom to operate. They may have relationships already, and partner relationships that will be hard to work around, right? So hospital systems have relationships with certain companies. Even if you have something better, are they going to break that contract because you have something better? So you have to look at that. Maybe they've been first to market and you're not. Maybe the cost of entry is going to be high, or you're asking people to incur costs from switching even to something better. Barriers to competition are once you get in the marketplace, what you can put up to stop everybody else from getting into the market. So it's basically the same list, right? But you have to think about it in different ways. And I just added one sort of thing here, is that maybe you can do something that nobody else can do. That's a powerful barrier, but it's not going to matter if you don't get into the market in the first place. So thinking about dollars, we don't spend a lot of time on revenues, right? Are you asking them for anything about money?
Mostly we just want those concepts to be out there. That
Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to work somehow. No, there's no, you don't need to submit a business plan.
Yeah, right. And I don't have anybody do that either. But a revenue model is basically the idea of figuring out what is it that you're selling, right? And how will the money flow happen? Who is actually paying for it, and why are they paying for it? So, you know, are we selling a consumer product? Is it a business product? Is it a system? Is it a supply that's in somebody else's product? You have to sort of at least figure out the fundamental revenue model of what that is. And really, there's only two kinds. Business to business, when you are a business to business kind of business, really, kind of venture, then the only reason that a business will buy, I don't care what it is, a system, a pill, a book, why will a business purchase something? Because it what? Helps them with their profits, or helps them lower their costs, or possibly stops something bad from happening. So maybe there's EPA requirements, and so a business will purchase a system in order to comply with laws. And you know, that's about it. And whether the business is a for-profit or a non-profit, it fundamentally doesn't matter. If you go to a hospital system that is non-profit and you have a great something that's going to increase outcomes for their patients, they might buy it. But why would they buy it? Will they buy it only because it increases outcomes for their patients? Really? Yeah, so if they produce more consumer satisfaction in a competitive world of many hospitals, they may get more patients, which means that you have now increased their revenues, right? So fundamentally, that's it. It's a very finite world with business to business, and it's important to understand that even in the nonprofit world, it usually comes back around to increasing revenues, decreasing costs, stopping something bad from happening, and possibly fulfilling the mission. In a business to consumer, it's a whole different thing. If you're selling something to a consumer where the consumer is the patient, why do we buy things, we as individuals? Why do we buy that tie?
It makes our lives better.
Makes our lives better, makes it more convenient, makes us look good, smell good, right? That's why, so that's a different value proposition. So, you know, why are there all these smoking cessation apps out there, and why don't they work? Yeah, it's not as good as smoking. If people really wanted to quit smoking, those apps would probably be awesome, right? But the value proposition for quitting smoking is dubious to an individual. I mean, I think. I mean, otherwise, it's a 60-40 kind of thing. As soon as it gets to the tipping point, they'll figure it out. So one more smoking cessation app isn't going to have a lot of value in the marketplace unless there's something really different about it. Unless there's somehow a value proposition that happens with the patient to make them do it. Now, maybe it's not a direct-to-consumer app. Maybe they're going through something else. There might be a real value if I have a smoking cessation app, if instead of going to the direct consumers, I go to a corporation. I go to Westinghouse, or I go to Bank of America or whatever, and I say, I'm going to increase this, I'm going to help you get your employees not smoking. And what's the benefit to the Bank of America if I can do that? Lower health care costs, boom. Increased productivity because my people are not outside smoking, right? Cleaner environment, you know, better place to work. I start to get on the top chart. There's all kinds of value proposition. So you have to sort of think about that and weave that into your business proposition from the beginning. There's kind of a new trend now in business to consumer because we do have a lot of consumer, particularly with apps and things, they can be oriented towards businesses, but ultimately you need consumers involved in them as well. And if you have a complicated model like that, then you have to have a value proposition all the way down the food chain and figure all of that out, right? Because otherwise it stops partway through. So revenue models, you guys can sort of figure this out, and pricing, I'm going to leave that. And I'm going to end with value propositions. So this is a picture of an Indian, and those are moccasins. And if you want to figure out what it was like to be an Indian in the United States of America, I mean, a Native American Indian, you better walk in the moccasins of the Indian, because we don't know otherwise. You know how people say, your parents say, you don't know what it's like to be me. You just wait till you have kids, or your spouse, or whatever it is. That's because there's truth to that. It's really hard to understand exactly what it's like to be somebody else unless you kind of walk in their shoes. When you are looking at business and you have been a researcher or a student, you kind of have to get out of your comfort zone and put on the shoes of the customers and ask yourself the question, what's in it for me? Why would I buy this? And if you can answer those questions, you might very well have a business opportunity. So a value proposition is all about the customers and what's in it for them. And we don't buy things individually unless there's something in it for us. We just won't do it. And businesses won't buy things unless there's something in it for them. And you have to understand that even at the idea. It might help if you, and I wouldn't suggest that you use this in your application to Pinch, because this is clunky. But if you filled in these blanks about your idea, saying what you provide to solve the problem to the customers who need us because, unlike the competition, our product blank, you know, we provide value through. If you actually filled in those blanks, that is the beginnings of a viable business, and that covers everything that we've just kind of talked about. Yeah, so technology doesn't equal business, and then coaching. So, oh, I'm sorry, this is old, but we'll be doing this again, I think, for the finalists.
Yeah, well,
yeah, we'll have coaching sessions. You know, and actually, I'll make myself available and others. So there's, at the Innovation Institute, and this is our website, it's the beginnings of a really great website, but it's got all the pieces so far. We have a number of entrepreneurs in residence, of other people that are, and they're part-time, but they're industry professionals. We have many in healthcare. And we also have people like myself that are sort of broad-based in business, and we'll be happy to meet with you, to help you. We did this in particular between the second and third phase of Pinch, but we'll do it beforehand if you contact us, and if you need our contact info, John, of course, always has that. And I think I put mine on here, but there's not just myself, we have other people as well. So, questions, thoughts?
Can you go back up the slide that had the fill in the blanks?
The fill in the blanks, yeah, we like those, right? But you wouldn't submit this like this because it's kind of boring. It's like
it's team exercise right here.
Yeah, exactly. It's like coming up with a mission statement.
What is it we're doing?
Yeah, just don't make it one big long run-on sentence. We can make these slides available too. John has them. I sent them to Nicole. You could send them around.
We'll post the video, so it's being recorded.
Yeah.
I have a question about when we talk about competition and for example, when we watch ads, usually there is a blank, is the competitor's product and our product is better. How specific are we going to be in the two-page document about describing the competitor or disclosing who the competitors are? Do we need to do that, or just sort of use the
I think I would use general. I would, if you can sort of categorize your competitors, because oftentimes competitors will fall into certain sort of buckets of competition, and the way to sort of do it at a high level would be to talk about the buckets, I think, and then maybe list one or two of the key players in each, if there's room. But if I read something or saw something, a presentation or whatever, where people talked about their competition and they said, our competitors fall into, there's other medical devices that are like this, but there's also surgical procedures that also, that shows a sophistication of knowledge and sort of some deep thinking about what you're actually doing. But I don't think there's a lot of room.
There's not a lot of room, and that type of statement is consistent with the space. I mean, the focus really is the problems, the solution, the team. I know that was in the video, but we want to have you expand on that a little bit. And then, you don't have a lot of room, but again, this is like seasoning.
That's
we want
right.
to start getting people thinking about their projects this way, just because that's how you translate. You touch the regular economy.
Yeah, that's right. And that's right. And so one of the things we're doing as a university, and certainly, John and his team at CTSI through these competitions are trying to do, is sort of take this out of the realm of ordinary. We're not doing business plan competitions. We're not really interested in business plan competitions because those are just written documents that never get implemented. And they're really kind of a crock of you-know-what anyway, because people are looking so far into the advance. What we're trying to do is get you to think about, if you understand who the customers are, well, the rest will sort of follow. Now, there has to be a value proposition. Otherwise, you really haven't figured out who your customers are. And I think if you put that kind of information into this, then we really start to have some legs. And then when you win and you get some money to really sort of investigate it further, rock on. I think that's great. And I think the proof's in the pudding. I think we've really got some interesting projects that are moving forward from last time.
Well, and they're getting some traction. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, some calls with major national foundations who want to try and move things forward. And so it's not always, this is going to make $1 million. It's like there's someone out there who wants this to help this patient group.
Yeah, that's
willing
right.
to help move it forward.
That's right.
Great.
Right, exactly. And we've got a lot of programs also that will help you move things along this pathway. We don't expect that you just suddenly wake up one day and it's eureka, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, that's ridiculous, We'll team a PI with an entrepreneurial lead, like a graduate student, hopefully in your lab, that is interested in doing this with a mentor, and put you through a process to sort of do this and give you grant money to sort of take things to the next level. I mean, we're a big university. We've got a lot of resources. My boss would kill me for saying that, wouldn't he?
I say the same thing, but the bosses aren't here now. So
That's right. We are the bosses.
Yes, sir. We're the bosses today.
Hopefully I won't be the scientist in your novel. But,
Well, you're alive, so you're already ahead.
one of my questions, I think because I'm a scientist and a physician, I've had a hard time getting my head around, is I have a very vulnerable end user. And I'm wondering how you protect a vulnerable population. I do see potential for what I'm doing to really reduce costs and be valuable, but I wouldn't want to put up barriers to competition because I want this population to get what they need. And I guess
Well, you would have to put
more on the business model.
Yeah,
How do
okay,
you
so
do that?
this is interesting, and I know it sort of flies in the face of sometimes our attitude as academics and researchers to be sort of open and all that. The thing is, you have, is it a device?
It's like a battery of testing.
Okay, so it's a battery of testing. So the thing is, if we want this battery of tests to get into the marketplace, somebody's going to have to invest money to do tests to make sure that we're not killing people while we're testing them, right? So you're going to have to pass safety, and you're going to have some kind of efficacy kinds of data and all that. So the investment required into that is going to be fairly significant. I mean, it could be millions and millions of dollars. Who would do that if this isn't a business opportunity? I mean, it's great to say out of altruism, we want to help people. And I hear you. And I don't mean to be crass or say that people shouldn't care about vulnerable populations. But I think at the same time that you have to look at it like a business, because if we had a cure for cancer, but let's say it was going to cost $100 million to get it in the marketplace, and it was going to be open source so anybody could do it. Who would actually do it? I mean, people would probably still be dying from cancer 100 years from now because you can't afford to invest $100 million.
I'll tell you the answer right now is a lot of small private grants. but I'm hoping that it expands beyond that. I agree.
The way I always say that is, and you're a physician, right?
Yeah.
So you appreciate the intense financial pressure on a lot of the things that you do and stuff. And I think that it's a matter of kind of acknowledging that those forces are out there, and part of you know, getting your cool thing out there to help people is at least acknowledging them and understanding that once your little boat goes out in the stream, those forces come to bear. So if you know a little bit about them and can kind of talk in those terms, it helps. And it's not because, you know, I want to make $1 billion. And
Yes,
just,
that's
it's not
right.
my selfishness. It's just kind of acknowledging the world we live in. It frustrates me a great deal that that's the case. But you know, the crass way to say it is, if
It's
GE
gonna
doesn't
happen.
want your idea in the clinic, it will never happen. And that's not fair, but it's true.
It's not fair, but it's true. But I think also in my work over the last 15 years, I've worked with a lot of physicians like yourself, and you guys are the ones to solve these problems. I mean,
Absolutely.
it isn't somebody on the outside who's going to come in and try to make $1 billion, but it's thinking, put enough of a business hat, you know, wear one moccasin, if not two.
I'm
to-
actually Native American too, so.
Oh, awesome. My daughter teaches Native Americans too, so I'm into the Native American
At least we got that
population.
going for us.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, you know, think about it, because you can't, you know, so the thing is about pure altruism is that it is based on many small grants, right? And that's not sustainable over time, and that's the problem. So if you really want to help people, it's ironic. If you really want to help people, take some business courses, right? And figure it out, because that's how really things will get to market.
Well,
You know,
think about all the crazy things that these economic forces, even outside the clinical world, you know, think of the things that we eat and wear and do because of the marketing. Like what Coke has to do with what I eat, what GM and Chevrolet have to do with the fact that I, you know, overwhelming pressure to have a car. Do I really need a car? You know, I live 2 miles up the road, but I have two. You know, and so I think that if you take a step back and say, wow, these economic forces are everywhere in our life, and I think that if you want to try to have an impact, you have to appreciate them as being there. And it's not selling out to the dark side to acknowledge that. You know, it's actually a way to say, this is a way I can champion the people that I want to help, because no one has their seat at the table. Okay, so right, you've got a vulnerable population. Who's carrying their flag against Coke?
and you know, we think of, you know, don't equate Coke and sort of like innovative startups, right? Because most people, yeah, and Coke must have been a startup at one point, but like they kind of lost all of that, right? And lost our respect along with it. But if you ask entrepreneurs, whether they're in healthcare or IT or whatever, kind of why they're doing what they're doing. I mean, they're not doing it to get rich. We can ask Mark right here. He's a young 23-year-old entrepreneur with a startup and working part-time and, you know, getting no sleep. And, you know, it would be great if he gets rich, but he's doing it because he found a problem that kept him awake at night, you know, and they want to have impact and make change. Am I right? Yeah. Hey, for those of you who are students, we have an MIT Enterprise. I mean, it's open to anybody, but we have a panel that I'm facilitating tonight that Mark is actually on called Dorm Room Startups. It's at 5:30 in the U Club, and it's an MIT Enterprise Forum, and we've got 2 startups out of Pitt, 2 startups out of CMU, and 3 of them are sort of in the life sciences out of those 4. And then 1 music startup out of Duquesne University from students. And why are young people choosing to sort of do these things now when they're in their early 20s? So it should be an interesting panel. And for, you know, particularly for students, I think it would be a good thing for you to come. And it's free for students.
How much is it for faculty?
I don't know. For you, $150 right here. No, I don't know.
No.
Yeah, right, exactly. I'm not sure, I think, but it's not much, yeah. But then there's all kinds of other things, too. So I wish you great luck in your second round of pinch competitions, and I hope that we're coaching you in a short amount of time, and happy to take questions offline. And anything else you want to say, John?
No, Nicole and I are here, so we have to chat as well, and we're just delighted that you made pinch what it is, right? No videos, no pinch. So I really appreciate your doing that, and I want to encourage you on, you know, it's risky to put together a video, right? You haven't done that before, but I encourage you getting over that hump, and it gives me great hope, because that will, makes me think you're going to do other interesting things that are different.
I'm sure that's right.
We had 60 videos in this round. Those 60 teams were made up of a total of 183 people who were registered. So our last round, we had 92 videos, which is a little bit more, but it was a little broader call. I think this time around, the videos were a much higher quality in terms of the projects, were clearly stated. Here's the problem, here's the solution. That was one of the big things we wanted to change around. It's not start out and tell me about your lab. Well, here's the problem and here's the solution. Again, a lot of it is aligned with what Babs is saying there, because the idea of translating has to deal with some of these market forces. And,
Yeah.
It's just a chance to get the work you do, which is fabulous, out into the broader economy.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Thanks for all your effort.
Oh, you're very welcome. All right, good luck, you guys.
Done.
Thanks, thank you.
And we'll post this so you can have
Yeah.
your teammates watch this.